All right, Psalm 133. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. For there the Lord commanded the blessing. And what is the blessing? Life forevermore. What is the context of the statement, the blessing, which is life forevermore? The context is this: behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. Because one thing we learned from the very beginning is that if there is going to be unity, that means two have to become one. And you cannot have life until two become one. And in the beginning, when the Creator formed man from the dust of the ground, he blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living nephesh, a living soul, a living being. He then said, it is not good for man to dwell alone. It's not good for man to be alone. So I'm going to make him a helpmate. And that term in Hebrew is ezer kenegdo. Ezer, to help. Kenegdo, like his opposite. Some renderings have it, I will make him a helper who opposes him. Think about it, gentlemen. Now, the opposition is not to undermine his authority as head and priest of the home. Here's the way it's worked in my household for the last 30 years. When I am not behaving as head and priest of the home, my little help opposite back home will get in my face and say, look, Buster, you're out of line. She doesn't try to assert my authority. She provokes me to assert my authority as the head and the priest of the home. So he said, I will make him a help opposite, or a helper that is like his opposite. Here's why I brought that out. He did not say a help similar, because a help similar would not fulfill the Creator's purpose for husband and wife, that they might be fruitful and multiply and produce life, because the Creator is not God of the dead, He is God of the living. So how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. And so when Paul speaks in Ephesians 2 of those that are called circumcision and those that they regard as uncircumcision, what does he say? Those of you who are afar off, cut off from the covenants of promise, having no hope, you were without Messiah, you were not part of the commonwealth of Israel, etc., etc. Now because the Messiah has come and has broken down the middle wall of separation, those of you who were afar off have now been brought near. You are now partakers of the covenants of promise. Now, therefore, you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but are fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God. And it's for this cause that he created or made this one new man, that he might present them both as one body unto the Father. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we could argue that to this point, those that are regarded as circumcision and those that they regard as uncircumcision have each done their little thing through the centuries. But until the two come together as one, they're never really going to produce life. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, it is my belief that in these last days, that is why you see so many Christians returning to the roots of their faith, wanting to understand where it is they come from as a faith. And that is why the adversary so desperately wants to stop it from happening. Because whatever the Creator's doing, you can guarantee that's where you're going to find the adversary in the midst of it, trying to sow discord, trying to disrupt it, try to dismantle it, undermine it. And you know who his greatest accomplices are? Us. Because in the parable of the wheat and the tares, how did he gain access to the field of wheat? Men were sleeping. I would recommend to you, they should have been guarding. Because this goes back to something that the Creator told Adam in the very beginning. He put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and to keep it. Literally to work it and to guard it. Because the serpent was the most subtle of all the beasts of the field. And we understand, at least this is my opinion, that the serpent of Genesis 3 is not some ordinary serpent. Because John, the Revelator, spoke of him in Revelation 12 and referred to him as that serpent of old. And so this is not an ordinary serpent, but look at where he's at. He's in the midst of the garden where the tree of life was, trying to seduce them to look not to the tree that produces life, but to a tree that renders death. But I want you to see he did not force that fruit down their throat. He couldn't do that. He doesn't have that kind of power. When Balaam was called upon by Balak, the king of Moab, to come and curse this people for me, referring to Israel, 3 times Balaam goes up to the top of the mountain to try to curse Israel, but 3 times he comes away having blessed them. And why? Because he tells Balak, because God has blessed them, I must bless them. Because you see, you cannot curse what God has blessed. The adversary, does not have the authority to curse what God has blessed. And so the adversary wasn't able to force it down her throat, or his for that matter. Balaam wasn't able to curse Israel, but here's what Balaam was able to do. To come up with a plan that he obviously gives to Balak, whereby he says, we can cause them to bring a curse upon themselves. And so they had the beautiful daughters of Midian and the beautiful daughters of Moab go entice the men of Israel to come to their sacrificial meal and to enter into the sin of Baal Peor. And they brought the curse upon themselves. Why? My view, they weren't alert. They weren't on guard. And so here's where I'm going with this. If 2 have to become 1 in order to render life, what do you think the adversary is going to be trying to do? Keep the 2 apart, isn't he? So that's why I believe the context in our verses here, the context for the blessing, which is what? Life forevermore. The context is how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. Now I want you to notice this. It does not say how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in uniformity. I came from a Pentecostal denomination, Church of God, based in Cleveland, Tennessee. And although, as far as I recall, no one ever said this, but there was an unwritten law that if you weren't Church of God, you were going to split hell wide open. If you didn't speak in tongues, if you weren't Pentecostal, you were going to hell because we just had the truth. Now, when I grew up, I met this young lady who I ended up marrying, and she was Southern Baptist. And it was my understanding that Southern Baptists believe that if you weren't Southern Baptist, you're going to go to hell. And especially all those tongue-talking Church of God people. This presented a little bit of an issue that we fortunately overcame. But whatever background you come from, I think, for the most part, you'd have to agree that we have this tendency that when we come to a certain conclusion about things, we think we're the only one who has the truth, and we've cornered the market on it, and everybody else is just wrong. And I just disagree with that. It doesn't have to look like me. It doesn't have to look like you. That's why God made us all a little unique and different. God creates stones, man makes bricks. Stones are unique. Some are large, some are smaller, some are jagged, some are smooth. Some stones are common, some are more precious, but all are formed and created by God. And by the way, through pressure. You have sand and silica, that pressure and heat, it causes that sand to fuse together. So think of it, all these little individual particles coming together as one. And some of them are granite and some of them are diamond. But they all serve his purpose. That is, if they fulfill that purpose. A piece of granite that is serving its intended purpose is more valuable than a diamond that isn't. But they are all formed by God, unique, but all to serve a purpose. And therefore we are regarded as, according to Peter, living stones. That the Creator is able to fit together and, according to Peter, build up his spiritual house. That, of course, he wants to reside within. Because he has the ability to take the jagged stones that would otherwise rub one another the wrong way, and he has the ability to fit them together exactly where they're supposed to go. Man can't do that. So that's why we've always made bricks. The first mention of man making bricks was at this little place called Babylon. Let us make bricks. and we're going to build this city. We're all going to come together in uniformity. Because when you take clay and you take straw and you take water and you mix them all together, and when all is said and done, the first brick looks exactly like the last brick. And that's the way we like it, because there are no rough edges to rub one another the wrong way. And everybody looks like everybody else, and everybody's on the same playing field, and everybody's going to be tolerant of everybody, and everybody's going to coexist with everybody. We're all going to go out and get blue bumper stickers and put them on the back of our car that say coexist. That's Babylonian thinking.